The Prophet at Madinah, activities of the Prophet. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his followers, were warmly received by the people of Yathrib, who changed the name of their town to Madinat un-Nabi, the city of the Prophet, in appreciation of the event. The first thing the Prophet did at Madinah was the building of a mosque, in the construction of which he himself worked as a common laborer with others. The mosque in which the Muslims began to meet to say their prayer collectively served as the first drill ground of Islam. After establishing himself at Madinah, he brought down his family there. State of parties at Madinah. At the time of the Prophet, Madinah was inhabited by different sections of people. Let us have a glance at each of them. The faithful followers of Muhammad, peace be upon him, who had forsaken their beloved birthplace and had followed him to Madinah, were known by the title Muhajirun, or refugees. The devotion of the Muhajirun to the Prophet was unbounded. They had abandoned the ties of kith and kin and had braved all sufferings and trials in the cause of Islam. The new converts of Madinah, who helped the Prophet through thick and thin, received the title of Ansar, or helpers. They cordially received the Prophet in their midst, and according to their promises at Aqaba, stood by his side both in weal and woe. The Ansar took active parts in all engagements, and on several occasions made tremendous financial sacrifices for the cause of Islam. They provided the refugees with houses and property. The brotherhood between the Ansar and the Muhajirun became so cordial that they could inherit each other's property in the event of death. The Ansar contributed largely to the success of Islam. In appreciation of their services, the Prophet advised his chief companions to take special care of the Ansar as regards their need, claims, and rights. The Madinite idolaters remained silent at the beginning of his arrival, and it seemed that the whole body of the citizens, unbelievers as well as converts, were ready to protect the Prophet. But with the rise of Islam as a separate power, the idolaters became jealous of his position. Abdullah ibn Ubayy, the most powerful citizen at Madinah, aspired to the sovereign power. Everything was ripe for him to capture the reins of power when the arrival of the Prophet upset his designs. There were other people who did not like the extension of his rule, but the popular enthusiasm compelled them to make a nominal profession of Islam. These people were working secretly against the Prophet. Hence they were called the disaffected, munafiqun. This class of people was more dangerous than the open enemy. The Prophet had to keep a vigilant watch over them. The Jews of Madinah were on a different footing. They joined with the Madinites in a welcome to Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Prophet, at the beginning, acknowledged the divine authority of their religion, and had even rested his claim upon the evidence of their scriptures. In order to maintain friendly relations with the Jews, the Prophet even adopted some of their customs and ceremonies. The Jews at first thought that they would be able to win over Muhammad, peace be upon him, to their party. But when they found that their hopes were not to be fulfilled, they gradually withdrew their support and became the arch-enemies of Islam. On his coming to Madinah, the Prophet devoted himself to the organization of the state. The old inhabitants of Madinah, the Ayyubis and the Khazraj, fell out among themselves. Taking advantage of their weakness, the Jews who had established themselves in the northern part of Hijaz exploited them for their self-interest. The Jews were divided into three branches, namely Banu Qurayza, Banu Nadirand, Banu Kainuka. The Banu Qurayza and Nadir were siding with the Aus, and the Banu Kainuka with the Khazraj. This diplomatic hostility resulted in the Battle of Boath, which had weakened one without strengthening the other. Thus the citizens of Madinah lived in constant anxiety and suspense. Such was the political condition of Madinah when Muhammad, peace be upon him, made his appearance among them. Political institutions. The Prophet at first abolished the tribal distinction and grouped the inhabitants of Madinah under one general name, Ansar, or helpers. In order to unite the Ansar and the Muhajirun, immigrants, in closer bonds, the Prophet established a brotherhood between them. He also fully realized the truth that the foundation of the Islamic empire would be very weak unless it was based upon the goodwill and support of all sections of people. Toleration of the other's religion is essentially necessary where different races live together. In this respect, his policy was live and let live others. He wanted to organize the Commonwealth upon a proper basis. With this object, he had granted a charter which is commonly known as the Constitution of Madinah, by which blood feud was abolished and all rights were granted to all sections of people, especially the Jews who lived in and about Madinah. The main provisions of the charter are the following. 1. All the communities signing the charter would form the common nationality. 2. If any of the signatories was attacked by an enemy, others would defend him with their combined forces. But 3. None of the nationalities should come into terms by any sort of secret treaty with the Qurayshite, or should give shelter to any of the Qurayshite, or should help them in any of their designs against the Madanites. 4. Muslims, Jews, and other communities of this republic should be free to profess their own respective religions and perform their religious ceremonies. Nobody could interfere in it. 5. Individual and personal offense of a trivial nature of any non-Muslim would be treated as such, and no general liability would fall on the community to which the offender belonged. 6. The oppressed should be protected. 7. Henceforth bloodshed, murder, and violence should be haram, abominable, in Medina. 8. Muhammad, peace be upon him. The Prophet of God would be the President of the Republic, and by virtue of it would be the highest court of appeal in the land. The importance of the charter lies in the fact that it may be regarded as the first written constitution in the annals of the world. Before the Prophet of Islam, many rulers ruled, but none gave such a written constitution to his people. The charter may also be called the Magna Charta of early Islam. It announced the great principles of civic equality, freedom of worship, and religious tolerance. It was Muhammad, peace be upon him, who for the first time realized the importance of the people's cooperation and goodwill in the administration of the country. The charter proves that Muhammad, peace be upon him, was not only a religious preacher, but also one of the greatest statesmen the world has ever produced. In this connection, W. Muir says, it reveals the man in his real greatness, a mastermind, not only of his own age, but of all ages. The provisions of this charter show that he not only strengthened his hands against the Quraysh, but also established his paramount position in the city of Madinah. Religious institutions. The Muslims at first were privately invited to the mosque, as it was dangerous to excite the enmity of the idolaters by openly calling believers to prayers. A special meeting was called under the guidance of the Prophet. At this meeting, several proposals were made which were found unsuitable by the Prophet. Umar told the Prophet about a dream in which he was instructed in the text of the Azan. The Prophet was convinced, and he introduced a better system of calling people to prayer by the utterance of what is called Azan. Bilal was the first man who was instructed to call the faithful to prayer. Henceforth 5 times of daily prayer were fixed. Ablution had by this time become the necessary preliminary to prayer. At midday on Friday, the service took a more public form at which the believers as a body were expected to attend. Jerusalem was the first Qibla of Muhammad, peace be upon him. But when Muhammad, peace be upon him, found that Islam could not go hand in hand with Judaism, he, with the divine order, changed his Qibla and thenceforth Jerusalem was abandoned for the Kaaba as the Qibla of Islam. The Jews were foretold in their book of the coming of a prophet, and when Muhammad, peace be upon him, came to Madinah, they recognized in him the promised prophet. But soon after, they rejected him out of jealousy and blindness. Muhammad, peace be upon him, after his coming to Madinah, saw the Jews keeping the great fast of atonement, and he readily adopted it for his own people in order to bring his religion into harmony with the Jewish rites and ceremonies. But when he cast off Judaism and its customs, this fast was superseded by another. Accordingly, about a year and a half later, the divine command was promulgated that the month of Ramadan was to be observed thenceforward as one of fast. As soon as the moon of the following month was seen, the restriction was to cease, and the day following was to be celebrated as a festival called the Eid al-Fitr. Shortly after, another great festival, viz. The Eid al-Adha, or the Day of Sacrifice, was established. Social institutions. The rite of circumcision was in vogue among the Arabs as an Abrahamic ceremony. The Prophet continued this practice for his own people. Subsequently, laws regarding remarriage, divorce, and inheritance of property were introduced, and drinking, gambling, plundering, and other heinous practices were abolished. Thus, when the Prophet was absorbed in organizing the state of Madinah, the war drum was sounded from a certain quarter of Arabia,